everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here. Welcome to our 2025 Climate Catch Lab annual Oration. I'm Kathryn Bowen. I'm the Deputy Director at Melbourne Climate Futures and the Director of the Climate Catch Lab here at the University of Melbourne. And as we begin, I acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation and pay respect to elders past and present. I'm very much looking forward to our orator weaving into her stories the reflections from Indigenous friends and colleagues. I have one contribution to make before handing over to our Pro Vice-Chancellor, Professor Alastair Sloan, to introduce our Climate Catch Lab orator for 2025. Given our focus on climate, health and wellbeing, and looking for other ways to rapidly accelerate our climate solutions, I'd like to share with us all tonight an adjusted Hippocratic oath. In fact, a climate oath, which was written by Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, some of you might know that author, and Oana Stanescu. So I'm sure you're all aware the Hippocratic oath, original ancient Greek version, was for medical doctors. This climate oath broadly harks back to the precautionary principle and aspires to open up new rituals for our climate-changed world. It is a chance to consider, what do we want to take with us? What should we leave behind? Ayana and Oana realised also that something critical had to come before first do no harm. Committing to the collective. Asking what can we do instead of what can I do. The climate crisis is not a one-to-one, doctor-to-patient, doctor as singular hero scenario. This is a human to humankind to all of life scenario. Ayana and Oana offer the following model for us to make our own and pass along. On the majesty of turquoise seas and fireflies and aspen trees, on the honour of our parents, our ancestors and humans to come, on the wonders of laughter and sunshine, I make these devotions to climate solutions for my community and for our magnificent planet. First, move from I to we. We will expand our sense of interdependence. We will rein in our sense of individualism. We will ask, what should we do together? Survival is collective, our fates are intertwined. Second, do no harm. We will restore and heal, not pollute and deplete. We will regenerate ecosystems and our own resolve. We will live lightly as part of the earth. Accountability, generosity and sweetness. Third, less is more. We will expand our creativity and contract our consumerism. We will conserve and distinguish between needing and wanting. We will be gentle with our own imperfections and others. There is such thing as enough. Possibility exists. This is a world of our making. We can remake it, remix it, restore it, rebalance it. The path of least resistance is only one of many paths. I will be part of getting it right. We will be part of getting it right. And tonight, I think we are all here because we know that creativity and imagination are such an important way for us to explore different possibilities to accelerate the urgent transformation to a world where humans see themselves as equal with all other parts of our incredible natural world, and where we can work together to create a safe operating space for nature, including, but going far beyond, humans. I will now hand over to our Pro Vice-Chancellor, Research Collaboration, Professor Alastair Sloan. Alastair leads university-wide initiatives, including Melbourne Climate Futures, to enhance the quality and impact of our research through partnerships, collaborations, and understanding of the national and international research landscape. So Alastair will introduce our orator for this evening. Thanks, Alastair.
Thank you very much, Kathryn, and good evening to everybody here. And considering I don't very often these days get to do an opening in Welsh, noswaith dda, given we have a Welsh Australian speaker this evening, and croeso i'r Prifysgol Melbourne. So welcome to the University of Melbourne. I too would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and the lands, of course, that we are here at the University of Melbourne on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I'm delighted to introduce Angharad Wynne-Jones, our orator for this evening. And also, just to add to Kathryn's initial comments there, that climate sustainability and all aspects of this are a critical area that we've now called in our new research strategy an acceleration impact area, a key focal point for research and education and policy change and advocacy across the landscape for the University of Melbourne. So the university is making a very clear commitment to this very important area, and I'm delighted to take on my role as a PVC in the last 12 months to lead a lot of that direction. Our orator this evening, though, I'm looking forward to hearing it, because to hear the climate and sustainability and the challenges with that creative lens, I think is going to be very, very different and very important. And also, I'm hoping for a very enjoyable and exciting evening. Angharad is a Welsh Australian, lives on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung in Naarm, a facilitator of Creative Climate, the Culture and Arts Climate Action Peak body, delivering sector support, engagement, participation and systemic transformation, funded by Creative Australia. She's an independent curator and creative consultant, following her leadership roles as head of audience engagement at the State Library of Victoria between 2021 and 2024, and head of creative engagement at the Arts Centre Melbourne between 2018 and 2021. Between 2011 and 2017, Angharad was the artistic director at Arts House Melbourne, where she initiated Refuge, a 6-year publicly engaged investigation into the role of cultural institutions and climate catastrophes. She is co-founder of Chunky Move, associate director of the Adelaide Festival, artistic director and CEO of London International Festival of Theatre, and founder director of Tipping Point Australia, energising the cultural response to climate change. She designed and delivered the Cultural Leadership MFA course at NIDA and leadership programs with Creative Australia, and is chair of aphids and an enthusiastic planter of indigenous trees and grasses. I must talk to you about that, because I am also planting lots of indigenous trees and need to learn some tips on how to look after those. But I'm delighted to welcome Angharad Wynne-Jones to deliver our oration this evening. Angharad.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and thank you very much, Kathryn. It's a real honour to be here. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting today on unceded lands and pay my deep respects to the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Kulin Nations and their elders past and present, and to all First Nations peoples who are with us. The sovereignties of this land were never ceded, and as we talk about climate, and all the life and lives that it sustains, it's vital to remember that First Nations knowledge systems have sustained life here for tens of thousands of years. As a white woman who is a settler immigrant to this country and the descendant of colonisers and settlers who were themselves colonised, it isn't possible to contemplate respectful relationships with country and with each other without acknowledging the ongoing violence of colonisation. I'm sure I speak for everyone in this room to say we condemn the abhorrent, violent, racist attacks by neo-Nazis at Camp Sovereignty on Sunday, and the continuing acts of colonial violence against First Nations people on their unceded lands. I'm honoured to be here with you. I'm assuming we're a diverse bunch of health professionals, climate scientists, systems thinkers, policymakers, public servants, artists, activists, enthusiasts. We likely share an understanding at some level of the current evidence, measurement, data, policy settings, and advocacy, and therefore the compelling urgency to respond to this crisis. We may have access to and be applying pressure to some of the levers for systemic change in our spheres of influence. Today, I'll speak about the sector I've been part of for over 40 years, arts and culture, in essence, storytelling, and why I think culture and art is critical to the systemic transformation we require. And picking up on what Kathryn said of moving from I to we, whilst I'm here in body, we'll also be hearing from 4 of the organisations that I collaborate with as part of Creative Climate. Because the diversity of voices in this space is as crucial as the biodiversity on the planet, and a critical part of the potential for collective learning. So my role at Creative Climate, which is funded by Creative Australia as the new national peak body for culture, arts and climate action, provides leadership, connections, advocacy and access to high quality resources that support artists and arts workers and arts and cultural organisations and their funders to transition from a carbon economy and to adapt to the impacts of climate change. We come together with a shared intent to respond to and support the sector in climate justice and adaptation. We're working across policy, practice, research, advocacy, and public programs to build and strengthen the mycelium of artists and organisations working towards climate-aligned cultural transformation. Creative Climate is a First Nations and artist-led national consortia made up of 4 powerhouse organisations, 2 experienced facilitators, and an environmental consultant. We're in our first year. We're in startup mode. We're building new ways of working. We're talking to different parts of the sector about their needs for and their barriers to taking climate action, to ensure that we're applying our resources strategically. We're building systems, processes, platforms, and ways of working as we go, and delivering our programs. We make strategic decisions collectively, meeting regularly online or in person when we can, and gather for a vision and planning residency annually to map the years ahead. The consortium nests within the governance, policy and administrative structure of Green Music Australia. And as a co-facilitator, I work part-time on the consortium activities, and each of the organisations receives funds as a contribution to their Creative Climate programs. We're committed to actively testing and trialling reduced carbon approaches in everything we do operationally and programmatically. Our deliberately lo-fi but hopefully super cool website reflects our intention to reduce our digital footprint. I hope you'll check it out and sign up for the newsletter. So what can art and culture do that science and carbon counting can't? In the current system, carbon counting has a role for sure. We need the data, the baseline, and we need the targets. But I remember Dr. David Caroli, who might be familiar to people here, saying as long ago as 2009 that we don't need to collect any more data to take action. And numbers don't move us. How many people here have read the IPCC reports? Hands up. Oh, well, that's a big amount. Congratulations. I don't think there wouldn't be many rooms in the country where that's true. Which is super impressive. And maybe you have felt galvanized versus paralyzed. But I think what art and culture can do is different. They help us feel. They connect us emotionally, spiritually, collectively, somatically. They remind us of what we value and what we stand to lose. A book, a song, a performance, an exhibition, a dance doesn't just tell us what's happening, it allows us to experience it. And when our hearts are moved or our bodies are implicated, action becomes possible. You will likely know better than me that there's research in health psychology that shows behaviour change doesn't come from information alone. It comes from urgency, from connection and meaning. And culture and art creates those conditions. I'll give you an example from within Creative Climate. When Green Music Australia runs a climate retreat for musicians, We're not just giving them the facts about emissions. We create a space where they listen to country, tell their own stories, and connect with each other. And then, when they go back on tour, they take action, changing how they travel, how they produce, how they speak to audiences, because it feels personal, it feels alive. Carbon counting tells us what must change. Art and culture helps us know why it matters and how we can do it together. Now I'm going to bring Jen and Claire from Centre Rewilding into the room to introduce us to the First Nations protocols that guide the way they gather and make work. This is about a 5-minute video.
Tanshi. Hello, everybody. My name is Jen Ray. I'm a two-spirit artist researcher of Canadian Scottish Métis descent from Treaty 6 territory on Turtle Island. Michif is our language. I'm calling in today from Jarrah country in Castlemaine.
Hi, my name is Claire G. Coleman. I'm a Noongar woman of mixed descent from the South Coast, Western Australia. I'm a writer and artist, and I'm calling in from Wurundjeri country in the hills near Naarm.
Both of us are co-founders of the Centre for Rewilding. We believe that climate change in its essence is a colonial crisis. And colonialism is all about severing relationship to land, country, ceremonies, culture, and keeping us in a mindset of scarcity, individualistic and survivalistic sorts of ways of thinking, knowing, and being. Indigenous worldviews center relationships, and the Centre for Rewilding's work is all about relationality. And to reworld is to decolonize, indigenize, and collectively imagine into action what legendary cellist Pablo Casals described as a world worthy of our children. And this means the children of today and the children of tomorrow, the centuries after that. So the Centre for Rewilding, what we do is we continue to grow our body of critical work as an organization through partnerships and collaboration. And we do this work to disrupt and subvert conventional platforms for engaging with the colonial crisis of climate change. We embrace something called deliberate structured improvisation as an emergent creative rewilding methodology for working deeply and collaboratively in these uncertain, unpredictable, and unprecedented times. And we're doing this work because our future generations are counting on us.
At the Centre for Rewilding, we consider protocols and doing things the right way is important. We have a set of protocols which are all about respect, acknowledging the importance of oral histories and oral cultures, and making sure that all the contributions of all involved are as equally important. The protocols are available in the book The Relationship is a Project, edited by Jake Lilly, Kate Larson, with Carl Kirkwood and Jax Brown. And they're developed in workshop with aunties Vicky Cousins, Vicky Kenai, and Mahubo Suleiman. We ask people to follow the protocols of the Centre for Rewilding so that we can all have a respectful engagement and so that the contributions of all members of the circle are equally important.
So our protocols are: let questions do the heavy lifting.
You'll be rewarded for your curiosity, generosity, and reciprocity. The questions you ask yourself and the questions you ask of others are often carry more information than the answers you might give.
Be mindful of the energy you give and the energy you take.
Listen and speak, but don't hog the ball or toss it out of the circle. Give time for others. It matters as much as yours does.
Listen to each other with the same passion in which you want to be heard.
Listening is as important as speaking. We listen so that we can hear others and the important things they have to say. And listening deeply is a skill that needs to be developed.
Understand that everyone is an expert at something.
You might not be the expert in the room. You might have a lot of knowledge about a topic, but you don't have the same knowledge from someone else's point of view. Somebody's point of view may be as important as your academic knowledge. So understand that you might know the theory, but someone else may have put the theory into practice in a different way to you.
Lean into the tensions.
We're all learning how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Hard conversations are hard, and hard things are important.
You have nothing to prove here.
We are all learning together. This is a collaborative environment. Be objective and acknowledge your biases, and acknowledge that no matter what we might feel, everyone is biased.
Please exist in this space in ways that are most comfortable to you, and understand that everyone exists in spaces in different ways.
You don't know someone else's life experience. If somebody is existing in the space in a different way to you, they probably have a reason that you are not aware of. So respect their need to do this differently.
Acknowledge and honor the contributions of others inside the circle when you leave the circle.
This is the most important protocol. Because this is a collaborative circle space, when you leave the circle, if you take anything from the circle, acknowledge the circle when you use that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think for me, what's extraordinary about the offerings that Jen and Claire give in this space is their care for the relationality, and that becomes their artistic practice. One of the projects, the kind of manifestations of that, is a project called Bilia, which you're welcome to look up, bilia.net.au, which is a digital relational mapping which is created by anyone. So if you have a project that you'd like to upload into the relational map, you'd be more than welcome to do that. But the difference, I suppose, between it and a database is that it looks at the relationships between people. So it is also people that are contributing to it are self-tagging and self-identifying. So we're imagining, as the project develops, that a new kind of lexicon of connection and language around connection might emerge that's different to, the kind of standard Google search ways that we kind of navigate each other and navigate information. A just transition. Climate change is not an environmental problem, it's a justice problem. Those who have contributed least to the crisis are most exposed to its impacts. First Nations communities, people in the Global South, low-income communities, and other minoritized folk are often those who bear the brunt of the devastating climate impacts. We know from the people of the Torres Strait and across the Pacific, many of whom are already becoming climate refugees. A just transition means we cannot only focus on reducing emissions or the much heralded energy transition. We must also heal relationships between people, between cultures, and between humans and country. We must transform the systems of inequity and exploitation that got us here in the first place. Otherwise, we risk solving one problem while deepening another. This is why Creative Climate is First Nations and artist-led, because any climate action that does not embed First Nations knowledge and leadership is incomplete. First Nations peoples hold the deep place-based knowledges we need to care for country, and they must be at the centre of decisions about land, water, and energy futures. These are the knowledges that have sustained life here for millennia. And as observers rather than the benefactors of the colonial project, they know how it works better than anyone. When we talk about health, justice is also at stake. We know climate change exacerbates health inequities, but we also know that cultural safety, storytelling, and belonging are determinants of health. So embedding climate justice isn't just about fairness, it's about survival. And again, this is where art and culture play a role. Art makes the invisible visible. It tells stories of communities on the front line. It shifts climate change from an abstract global crisis to a deeply human experience. Without those stories, we risk leaving people out of the transition. For health professionals, the link is clear. Climate change worsens inequities in health. For artists, the link is equally clear. Stories and cultural practices shape who is included in our imagined futures and who is left out. Now we'll hear from Aliki Reid from ACFA, which is a Climate for Art. And again, it's about a 5-minute speech from him.
My name is Aliki. I am one half of a Climate for Art. A lot of our focus with the Climate for Art is around the ways of empowering the art sector as agents of change within climate action. So our major focus in organising is to push organisations towards divesting from fossil fuels, and the focus is on shaping our relationship to finance emissions. So we focus here on banking and superannuation and how these financial institutions majorly fund fossil fuel projects within Australia. And we try to mobilise both artists and arts organisations and arts workers around thinking about themselves as stakeholders and stakeholder advocates, and the role that and the strength that they have to place pressure on financial institutions to change their financing habits. That's sort of the main focus for us when we're talking to organizations and trying to organize. But then also there's a piece in it where I think the broader thinking around our approach, at least, is on wanting to build a community around climate action. And so we're speaking to organizational leaders, but we're also speaking to independents, to individuals who mobilize around climate action. We engage them in things like symposia and reading groups and camping as well, and trying to build a community of practice around climate change. So very much focused on action and how to mobilize and how to create a simpler pathway towards mobilizing people on the topic of climate action and climate change. And yeah, a lot of that is sort of recognizing how everyone within their own right is holds knowledge in this space, holds a sense of maybe not so much expertise, but holds the keys to affect change. And yeah, a lot of this is in our minds, community building and confidence building, because I think often climate action is obscured behind perfectionistic politics, and we're just interested in getting people to do something. And by we, I'm talking about my collaborator, Lana Nguyen, and myself. We're very excited to be involved and invited to join the Consortium for Creative Climate. And a lot of the people in this space are comrades who are doing the really awesome work of everything from futuring and envisioning, but also in a funding landscape that is diminishing. There's not a lot of energy to mobilize toward action when a lot of organizations are focusing towards survival itself. And I think part of the ways that we try to address this with the Climate for Art is that we try to have an open model to whatever knowledge we develop, whether that's the pathways themselves towards divestment, or whether that is sharing different practices and platforming leaders within the climate space, from organizations to individuals themselves, what sort of actions that they're initiating. and that's to ensure that there isn't a barrier towards climate action or towards membership in a climate for art. I think one of the challenges as a consortium is to find is to hold at once the multiplicity of our voices with each other, as well as how to convey how the sector and ourselves are unified in taking action. And that's a thing of, I think, of growing and being with each other and finding a sense of familiarity in our ways of working, but then also highlighting the strength and difference that we all have and the importance of a diversity of tactics, which I think for me is really central to effective movement building. It's not so much about building one concentric hegemonic voice, but more a way of articulating how all of our efforts lead to a deeper sense of clarity and a way of relating to this issue as a cultural problem and the many sort of problems that it exists as, which I think Centre for Rewilding articulate really beautifully. I think where Lana and I are focused on is how to lead people toward action. Like, what is the easiest pathway to carve out so that people can feel empowered to do so?
So you're probably getting a sense of the kind of breadth of practice and of approaches within the consortium. And I think, again, referencing your opening remarks around collaboration being so critical, I feel like that is the superpower that we need to really build muscle around over the next decade. We know we can't solve systemic problems in silos, but collaboration is hard. And we've been conditioned by a culture of hyper-individualism, competition, and siloed expertise. But we know that no one, no sector, no discipline, no organisation can solve it alone. So at Creative Climate, with 4 very different organisations, we're learning, sometimes clumsily, how to collaborate across our differences. We don't always agree, but staying at the table is itself a practice of transformation. And collaboration might mean lots of different things in different contexts, working with communities, working with artists, with scientists, with funders, with policymakers, people with lived experience, people from different disciplines and backgrounds with a variety of access requirements. It means stepping outside our expertise and embracing uncertainty and failure. So I think the question that we have is not how do we collaborate efficiently, but how do we collaborate deeply enough to learn what is impossible to know alone. Collaboration's not a nice to have, it's a critical capacity that we need. And we're experimenting on how we might build that capacity at Creative Climate. Some of the challenges and opportunities of consortium work involve balancing diverse practices which have different resource requirements, divergent accountabilities that each of the consortium members have to their communities, and working across scale and place. We're learning how we prioritise where we place time and energy without bureaucratizing. It requires bravery, patience, and humility, and a listening for the rhythm and confluence of our connections, and advocating for each other's work. We're learning to hold tensions between metrics and meaning, urgency and care. We're relishing the richness, the bringing together of different art forms, First Nations knowledges, activism, and experimentation together. We got into this crisis through hierarchies of power and knowledge. We will only get out through reciprocity and shared learning. We ask ourselves what new possibilities emerge when we see culture itself as climate infrastructure. And now we're going to hear from Kelly from PVI Collective.
Hello, hi, I'm Kelly from PVI Collective. PVI is based in Boorloo, and we're an experimental performance company that have been around since 1998. And we make agitational, participatory performance work and public interventions that invite audiences to actually come with us on a bit of a journey or an adventure, and seek out ways in which we can confront difficult issues and topics in playful and participatory ways. And I think why we're so keen to be involved with Creative Climate really is that it's for us, I think it's probably the most important conversation that we can be having at the moment. It is we're in the critical decade of the climate crisis, and from all accounts, between 2027 to 2037, it's absolute crunch point. And so what are the ways in which artists and creative makers from all disciplines can actually confront this reality that we're in, using the tools that we have to hand, which is, our creative tool belt. And so I think that really for us, we make work collaboratively. So a lot of the work that we make, because it's participatory in nature, the work is kind of often halfway there, and then the audience need to meet us at the other half, and it's never complete until an audience is engaged with it. So collaboration for us is a really big part of our process and our practice. And whenever we collaborate, it's always better for it and stronger for it. So I think we really feel that collaboration is vital, particularly in these times, and ways in which we can lean in to the trouble together and learn from each other. Not just skills share, but also knowledge share as well, and find ways for that to kind of feed in to the creative process, and also for audiences, so that we feel as though we're not alone and that we're in this together, and that to actually try to find some hope amidst the chaos and catastrophe that we face. So we're really honoured to be part of Creative Climate, and I think that we're going to do whatever we can to bring some joy and play to what is an impossibly horrendous reality that we're living in at the moment. So some of the work that we've made, direct political interventions. We set up a fake carbon counting task force called the Social License Watchdogs, which actually used a real scientific methodology for the social cost of carbon. Like, what is the cost of 1 metric ton of CO2 in going into the atmosphere? What is the cost to land, to people, to health? And actually did the math and calculated the cost that a lot of the fossil fuel companies actually costing us in terms of human and planetary well-being, and set up some invoices, giant invoices, and attempted to deliver them directly to the front doors of these fossil fuel corporations. I think, being based in Boorloo, we have an extremely powerful fossil fuel lobby here, and we have a lot of the fossil fuel companies' head offices also based in Boorloo. So we really feel as though there's a responsibility to actually try to confront this in creative ways and slightly playful and cheeky ways. Other work that we're making at the moment, that we're making a work about radical hope, which feels like the most impossible thing to be striving for, and maybe that's why we're leaning into it. But it's taking, I guess, the essence of Rebecca Solnit, thinking about hope as a muscle and something that needs to be activated and strengthened. And so there's an invitation for audiences to time travel to various social movements and social tipping points throughout history, and kind of revisit and inhabit these moments, these crucial moments where things changed and those ripple effects have kind of crossed over through time, as a means to kind of learn from the past and to remember what came before. And I think so much of the colonial project is really about silencing and trying to find ways to oppress what came before. And capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, racism, it all sits on top. But what came up before is something that we need to kind of reactivate and re-energize. And so it's an invitation for audiences to time travel to various social movements, and as a means to boost their own hope batteries. So it's a playful response, and it's actually looking at the power that social movements have to create and activate change. And that, it may be one individual sitting outside the steps of Swedish Parliament with a handwritten sign that goes on to kind of create this large, global movement of school strikers against climate. And, for us, it's about kind of focusing on those little moments, those tiny cracks, and finding ways to kind of honor them and represent them creatively in the work. So it's a big project that we're working on at the moment, and I feel as though for us that's always a challenge to try to find ways in which we can grapple with difficult subject matter in playful ways. And I don't use the term play in a kind of a light sense. We talk about serious play, that actually as adults we should be engaged in serious play, and it is a tactic, I suppose, to try to kind of navigate complexity. I think there are opportunities for kind of deep learning, and it's an incredible cohort that we feel really privileged to be in the same orbit as some of these artists. And I think that when things slam together in this way, or that kind of bringing together of all of these different skills and these different worldviews and these different mindsets, I think that there is an opportunity for expansive growth, and that will naturally feed into whatever creative projects we have coming up. And I think as well the opportunity to just kind of realize that we're not on our own, that actually there are many people, many great organizations doing incredible work around climate. But actually within the creative sphere, there are also a great deal of artists who have been making work, land-based work, climate-based work, First Nations work that's kind of, looking to address our relationship with land and nature. It's just an incredible opportunity, I think, to strengthen ourselves and to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves as well, and to also acknowledge that we still have a lot to learn. It's constant learning, but when that's done with people who care and people who listen and people who are up for collaborating and up for making mistakes and getting things wrong, it's a really special environment to be part of. So we're really grateful for that.
Refinding connection to land. We have all been or are Indigenous to somewhere. Somewhere in our histories, our ancestors lived with reciprocal relationships to land, water, sky, and more than human kin. Colonialism, capitalism, and the patriarchy ruptured those connections for many of us. And now climate change is rupturing them further, displacing people from homelands and eroding cultural continuities. So how do those of us who are not Indigenous to here re-find our connection to land that is not ours? And what does allyship look like for First Nations communities to be caring for country across regional and remote Australia and in the midst of our urban cities? First, by acknowledging the rupture, the violence, not papering over it. For non-Indigenous people, caring for land here begins with listening and taking direction from traditional owners and cultural knowledge keepers. Second, by remembering our own lineages, even if fragmented, we can discover, rediscover ancestral practices, songs, foodways, seasonal cycles that remind us our cultures too once lived in reciprocity with place. And third, by moving from observation into embracing observances and ritual in our climate action. Ritual doesn't have to mean religious. It means recognizing the earth and all beings as more than resources. If ritual is an honoring of time and place, what does that mean in our day-to-day lives and practices? Rituals can be small, a moment of gratitude before a meeting, a planting with intention, a collective mourning for species lost. Art itself is ritual. Gathering to sing, to dance, to tell stories is an act of honoring and a practice of care. So refinding connection is not about becoming Indigenous. It's about recovering our shared human capacity for belonging and responsibility, while holding space for and not appropriating the knowledges of others. When we practice ritual, we begin to shift climate action from compliance or obligation to observance or even devotion to love. And that is a much more powerful motivator than fear. I want to share an event that Creative Climate has initiated that you're all invited to, and it's happening this Sunday. It's called Planting, and it's a mass community planting event, a day of community connection and caring for country. And it's taking place across 9 sites, across Naarm's creeks and rivers, and it culminates in a party at Fed Square. Planting is more than putting seedlings in the ground. It's a shared celebration and ceremony with Wurundjeri elders, offering hands-on opportunities to connect with nature, culture, and each other. In partnership with community groups focused on habitat regeneration, the event invites everyone, locals and visitors alike, to contribute to planting native trees and grasses. In the afternoon, the celebration begins with a Wurundjeri smoking ceremony, with live music from the Orb Weavers, music for plants by DJ Earworthy, beautiful sound and art installations, an art poster by Indigenous artist Zena Cumpston, and a host of interactive workshops, including seed propagation. It might not look like what we would call art in previous decades, but it certainly feels like culture. In this transition era, we're calling planting an insetting program, as opposed to the increasingly meaningless offsetting approach. Planting is an experiment in creating a collective cultural action at scale that, if we practice it enough, could help us move away from that transactional relationship many of us have with culture to an embodied, connected ritual. And now we're going to hear from the 4th and final member of the consortium, Berish from Green Music Australia.
Hi all, I'm Berish Bylander, CEO of Green Music Australia, a songwriter and pianist and dad to one beautiful 8-year-old. When I joined Green Music as its first employee, we were just a fledgling volunteer initiative sparked by the vision of our founder, Tim Hollow. More than a decade on, we've grown into the peak not-for-profit working at the intersection of music and climate. Our mission is twofold. First, to reduce the environmental impact of the music scene, helping festivals, tours and venues shift to renewables, eliminate plastic and reimagine how the industry operates. And second, to harness music's unique cultural power, because tackling the climate crisis isn't only about cutting emissions. It's also about shifting the stories we live by. Music has always been central to cultural change. Artists can dismantle old myths, like that humans are separate from nature or that progress equals extraction. and imagine new futures built on care, creativity, and connection. As the wonderful Guarani scholar Vanessa Andreotti says, songs and stories carry the wisdom of ancestors and the possibilities of futures not constrained by the logics of modernity and colonialism. That's why art matters. It helps us hold complexity, find courage, and mobilize together. And that's why collaboration is so vital. It isn't always easy. It asks us to listen deeply, step outside our comfort zones, and sometimes sit with tension. That's where the magic lies. That's why we came together as the Creative Climate Consortium, to bring a biodiversity of perspectives and lived experiences into one space. It's also about extending for us beyond music into all art sectors that have their own magic. This consortium is a mini experiment of what needs to happen at the macro level. Artists and organisations across disciplines weaving knowledge, creativity, and action together. It shows how collective governance and shared learning can help us build the cultural shift the climate crisis demands. Together, we can make culture the driver of the change we urgently need. Thanks.
So in closing, let me bring us back to the beginning. Carbon science matters. We need the numbers, but it will not be enough on its own. We also need art and culture to open our hearts. We need climate justice to ensure transition heals, not harms. We need collaboration to learn what is impossible to know alone. And we need to re-find our connection to land, so our climate action is rooted in belonging, ritual, and care. I invite you to engage with the cultural sector, not as an add-on to climate action, but as partners in rigorous and relational inquiry. Because the transformation we need is not technical, or not just technical. It's cultural, social, and deeply human. Carbon counting can tell us the problem. Culture, justice, collaboration, and ritual can help us live the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angharad. That was really wonderful. Deeply moving. Also, just so incredible to hear the different perspectives that the consortium is presenting, and the very different approaches. We've got a few minutes for any questions, if anyone would like to ask Angharad a question. Yes, and please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I should have said maybe that we are funded by Creative Australia, but through the experimental branch of Creative Australia. So I think their investment in us as a consortium is in that cross-disciplinary, hybrid approach. So yes, we'll definitely be working and do work across multi-art forms, all kinds of different art forms, but increasingly, I think the discussion needs to break out of the arts and culture sector and become, engaged with, all kinds of disciplines, climate science being a clear contender, but yes, all parts of our society, and we'll need everyone to come on board with this, I think. Yeah.
And how do we come on board?
There was a question here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Emily, and thank you for the really beautiful talk. There's so much in there. I was just going to ask if you could tell us a little bit about refuge and just about the role of arts and culture in community disaster resilience.
Yeah, another great question. So yes, Refuge was a 5-year kind of open-ended inquiry into what might the role of cultural institutions be at a time of climate crisis. And we kind of identified different scenarios and each year we practice that with communities in North Melbourne at Arts House. So the first one was a flooding, an intense rain event. There was a heat event. There was weirdly a pandemic a year before we got the pandemic. So there were various scenarios that we looked at. And I think what we identified, and it's maybe where, you know, this kind of collaboration has come from, is that at a time of crisis, you know, everyone in the community needs to do what is critical for the survival of that community. And we know that emergency services are not necessarily able to do that first respondent work, and that it is really important that you know your neighbour and that you are aware of what their needs are, what capacities you have. So in these different scenarios that we tested and trialled, I think we created this kind of speculative space with our local communities that were rehearsing what might be needed. And, you know, I think that was pre many of the really, you know, the horrendous floodings that have happened, the bushfires. And I think now it's clear that in terms of recovery of communities, that the more preparation people do, the more understanding of what the actual risks are and how they might respond to them, the better equipped they are to survive and even thrive. So I think you know, the things that these artists and many artists in the cultural sector have to offer is, I think, that kind of playfulness and the courage to sit in complex situations and find the kind of joy in connection and encourage people to engage in those spaces in those ways. Yeah, does that kind of give you a bit of a, yeah. So in terms of how you get involved, well, you know, classically, please sign up on the newsletter. We are trying to wean ourselves off social media over the next 4 years. That would be a beautiful ambition. I think we know how much of a problem these are in our own lives, certainly in my life and certainly in our young people's lives, in terms of capacity to listen, capacity to pay attention. So yes, please sign up. Come along on Sunday. I mean, there are 4 organisations. They're all doing extraordinarily beautiful, different work. I would be surprised if you didn't find something that appealed. The Billion Network is a beautiful way to, you know, locate yourself in relationship to other people in the sector that are doing things. Yes. Please get on board, and you know, we'll keep people updated as projects emerge. I should say, another project that we're developing, COP31, you know, hopefully it'll happen in Adelaide. We're looking to do a project called Radio Climate, which would be, as it says, a kind of amplification project that would literally support and amplify the stories from across Australia of, you know, resistance and transition. You know, there are beautiful stories of habitats that have been regenerated successfully, of, you know, original power where First Nations folk are transitioning solar energy and becoming economically stable. And so, yes, we want the stories of resistance, the stories of transformation and the deep listening to country to be a big part of whatever it is that happens at COP31. So, yeah, we'll be doing a call out for works, existing works and new works for that context. So, yeah, if you've got or know of work that might be relevant, let us know.
And we'll know either at the UN General Assembly or in Belém, COP30, whether or not Australia will be hosting COP31 next year. And I mean, it's wonderful that they're already considering creativity, culture and art in their programming. So the COP31 team is seeing that as a really important area for support. So maybe time for one more question if there's any. Oh, sorry, you've sat down now. But you know, no, okay. Well, maybe that. Any final question? Ah, yes, Stuart.
I was just wondering, one of the tensions that was raised was getting people involved when they feel like they're surviving as an artist. And I was thinking about how so many of our arts and cultural institutions are, you know, PhD, Woodside. I think about from South Australia and the role of PhD in funding the art gallery, for
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we have our own policies around where we would accept money from, but I think it's also clear the system is, there's no such thing as clean money. If we're accepting money from the Australian government, we're implicated in all of the decisions and the policies that they're making. So I don't think it's a clear, clean kind of they're wrong, we're right. I mean, I just noticed that Lana and Aliki, who are the youngest members of our team in their just turned 30, I think, and they are the ones that are most committed to thinking through beyond a transactional relationship to what they're doing. So I'm constantly saying, you can't do that unless we pay you, or, because they're experiencing the cost of living and housing crisis and all the things that, we are experiencing. But I suppose what I'm articulating or trying to articulate is that I feel like they are not wanting to be beholden to that system, and they're wanting to invest in other kinds of currency that are about relationships and care and friendship and community, and that is the joyful part and actually the sustaining part. And when the emergencies happen, we know that that's what resides and what keeps people together. So I think, it's not an answer, but I'm definitely learning from those, from Lana and Aliki, how resourceful and how much depth of kind of care there is there, and that the kind of art making that we're doing, you can make a crystal radio set out of a toilet roll and a piece of wire and tell some beautiful stories. It's not that we need to have huge kind of production values for the kind of work that we want to do. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we can all learn a thing or two as well from your remarks around how we communicate amongst ourselves in our workplaces, the importance of joyfulness, the importance of listening, and I think the importance of being hopeful as well, and the serious play you mentioned, I think, is really, really critical. So your point around climate as culture, as climate infrastructure is great as well. I think I've really taken that with me. So art matters, creativity matters, and culture matters. And I think that's really, really fundamental for all of the work we do in our personal lives or in our professional lives around accelerating action on climate change. So please join me to thank Angharad once more for her oration this evening.